Solvitur Ambulando, The Adventures of Steve and Dixie by Stephen Breakstone. Episode 10, Snippets from My Journal. Month 2, July 1986.
I'll start the second month of my snippet journal with a side note.
Our fun with Lucy Parlange and the Parlange Playmates at the end of June was beyond refreshing. It was crucial reinforcement of why I was walking across America. Yet, I was still often unsure why I continued to do what I was doing. So far, Parlange was the exception to the rule. From conception to step one, I had no doubts and nothing but confidence in walking to Seattle and have an incredible adventure that would lead to a happy, satisfying future. I knew that there would be challenges, and I felt prepared for some of them, including the heat, humidity, and short rainstorms. But those challenges, combined with bursts and bouts of aloneness, anxiety, uncertainty, and boredom, was, well, almost overwhelming. And the passage of time took on a completely new meaning. Perhaps it is obvious by the flow of this journal. There was no way I could have prepared for the combination of so many unknown challenges hitting at once. It had only been 100+ miles and only 2+ weeks of walking, and every day, and for far too many steps, it continued to be challenging, more mentally than physically. But we continued up Route 1, heading further northwest into Louisiana. Of course, sometimes the emotions were glorious and motivating. For instance, I remember that every morning Dixie would wake up after a refreshing sleep and walk, run, and sniff planet Earth with joy and freedom. She was full of life, and all on our side of the road. Her energy and enthusiasm would have been impossible to contain, even if she was leashed. It was always an inspiring way to start the walking day. Oh, do I wish I had video of that. But the sun would rise higher, the temperature would rise higher, and the humidity, well, that always sucked. By mid to late morning, Dixie would begin to tire. At that level of my experience, I wasn't aware how her change in lifestyle would affect her stamina. She wasn't sleeping 20 hours a day like she had for the previous few months. It had never been suggested, nor had I thought, how upending her sleep cycle would affect her stamina. All I was aware of was her black pads looking reddish and her panting. Still, having fun or feeling fatigued, Dixie knew I was her human. Regardless of her physical state of being, she followed me no matter what. She learned the rules of the road and the boundary of the white line on the asphalt. She was mostly leash free. I rarely had to correct her behavior, and when I did, it didn't take long for her to learn. And she was still a puppy at less than a year old.
Dixie and I pushed each other, at least in my mind. Did I push her too much at times? Probably. But ultimately, I found the best balance for us both that I was capable of finding at that time.
July 2nd, 1986, Wednesday. Thoughts recorded during the day. Pain. Walking can get downright boring. Stopping to rest can be boring. Sometimes there is no stimulation, no people, no pretty scenery, nothing profound. And sometimes when I do meet people on this trip, the conversation becomes redundant, at least to me, as people want to know what Dixie and I are doing and what she carries in her pack. Pleasure. A life with no hassles, pressures, or neuroses, just peace. Doing it all for myself and not someone else's profits or portfolio. Pain. Waking up in the middle of the night in some field and having to urinate. Unzipping the tent, walking about 20 feet, standing in place, and doing what comes naturally. Then, unwittingly, having a fire ant and 10,000 of his or her buddies crawl up and onto my foot, ankle, and lower leg. Then, via the ant communication network, all agreeing to bite me at the same time. Talk about a hot foot. A variety of lessons and a variety of methods. It really hurt, but it was funny too. It was funnier than painful. I appreciated the lesson. Watch where I step. I won't make that mistake again. Pleasure. Walking along and watching the cows and their calves, our version of stopping to smell the roses, or in this case, the manure, and having them walk along their side of the fence down the road with us until their field ends. Cows are as curious of us as we are of them. There's a real peacefulness and beauty to the experience of walking with calm and content cows for a while. Perhaps they have seen humans and dogs before, but with our packs on, who knows what we look like through the eyes of a cow? We entertain each other. Later that evening, I was in the mood for a restaurant cooked meal today, so I pushed to get 15, 16 miles to Simsport by 4 o'clock. Being late in the day, all that was left on the lunch buffet was meatloaf, rice dressing, and bread for $1.95. I ordered 2 dinners. I was finally stuffed. Only in the South can you be totally stuffed and satiated for $3.90. I rested a bit to unbloat myself and then planned to walk only a couple of miles out of town before we stopped for the night. About a mile after the cafe, I saw some people sitting in a gazebo-like thing in a Civil War memorial park, and they waved us over. So we went over. I have been learning the difference between experience and dreams, the difference between wanting to meet the different people of the country and actually meeting them. Here is another experience. Side note, all these names are changed. Leanne was a short 22-year-old married mother of little 3-year-old Billy. She was drinking beer and smoking with her 20-year-old lover, Jerry, who was drinking, smoking cigarettes and pot, and popping some speed. He looked 28 or 30. Jean was the mom of a 16-year-old girl and 13-year-old son, and together they were partying. Not a good example, in my opinion. And then there was Arthur, a divorced man and seemingly independent. I haven't been impressed by some of their actions, but they are, in fact, friendly, happy, and welcoming people. This was all a little different for me, and so I stayed for a while to see what was what. And when Arthur invited me to sleep in his house, I couldn't refuse. They were so nice. And I figured I can get a shower. Even now, I don't recall any poignant conversation, but there has been a lot of laughter and not much complaining, griping, or worrying about anything. The conversation was meaningless, but I was enjoying their company. Unfortunately, Arthur's shower isn't working. I'm not that surprised. The house is a manufactured home and not in the greatest condition. It's not bad, but money needs to be put into it. I'm sure he doesn't have it. I'm not quite sure of my decision to stay at Arthur's house because, as nice as these people are, they are not my type. I do find it interesting that in their niche in life and society, they are happy, or so it seems to me. Meeting and hanging out with people like this for a little while is, in a way, just as important as my time with Miss Lucy and Lewis, the man back at that bar way back at the beginning of this journey. Who am I to judge a person living in a small town with a small job, or none at all, smoking, drinking, and screwing? Leanne mentioned that many of her days included going up with her girlfriends over the levee of the Atchafalaya River to pick some mushrooms and have a ball cleaning the house. The bottom line, as far as I was concerned, was that they were funny, friendly, and giving. Yeah, it seems like fun, but in the end, I need more. Addendum. The contrast of my time at Simsport and my time at the Parlange plantation has not gone unnoticed. I had no desire to stay beyond the morning and left pretty early.
Side note. Over the decades, I've met many people with similar qualities to those folks at the gazebo at Simsport. People on the lower tier of America's socioeconomic and educational ladder. People who are friendly and generous, but make what I would consider unwise and unhealthy choices. Choices that I now know can lead to serious challenges that I was too young to be aware of at that time. Meeting Leanne and Jerry and Jean and Arthur, etc., at that juncture of my life, a time that epitomized the inexperience and open mindedness of a young man, provided a greatly appreciated, powerful experience into what I, from my background and culture, would consider a very different American culture, one that I began to see in more places in America than just Simsport, Louisiana. Now, I have thoughts about that aspect of our American culture, but I won't share them here. So, until next time, peace.